Well, today we're talking trees. The City of Wichita forestry crews have been dealing with a lot of dying trees over the past few years, so we brought in our city arborist, Gary Ferris, to tell us more about it. Gary, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first, just give us a general update about what's been going on with our trees.
Well, over the past few years, I'll just say since 2011, the city has lost, or we have removed, over 18,000 trees on our city right-of-ways and our parks on city property. And we're not done. That's the big kicker, is that we are not done removing these dead and dying trees. There's still more out there. So we are very busy. We are trying to mitigate these hazards and get it done, get it caught up to where we can get back to pruning and other forestry-related activities. Can
you put that into perspective for us? I mean, 18,000 sounds like a lot.
It does sound like a lot, and it is a lot. We estimate that we have about 350,000 trees under the city's umbrella of authority. So, do the math on that. I mean, it's a 5-6% of the total tree canopy. That being said, there are things coming down the pike where we're going to lose more of our canopy, and so it really does present a detrimental situation to our total tree canopy.
So what's the deal? Why are all the trees dying?
Well, we experienced some really extreme weather, and trees are living organisms. This extreme weather really stressed them out, whether it was the drought that lasted, well, we're still in it, but it lasted for 2 years really hard. We had extreme heat, we had extreme cold, and we had extreme swings within short amounts of time. So those environmental conditions really took its toll on trees, both public and private.
And I understand the City Council recently took some action to help out your division.
Yes, they did. They approved $250,000 for us to go out into the private market, solicit bids for private contractors to come in and help remove trees, and they'll remove the tree, grind the stump, and do site restoration up into the point of putting dirt back in the hole where the stump was, and then that's a complete job right there.
And how long do you think that work will take?
We should be done with that by the end of the winter.
So for people who maybe aren't really familiar with trees and how they work, I mean, is it going to be easy for us to get caught up and to bring the numbers back up again?
Absolutely not. That is going to be a lot of hard work and potentially expensive work. What we need to do is plant at least 2 trees for every tree that we lose. That's to help get the canopy back to where it should be, and maybe even possibly advance it. But we're moving in a really negative direction with how many trees that we're losing versus how many we have to plant back.
And I'm sure that's partly because it takes so long for the tree to fully mature.
Well, it takes a long time for it to fully mature, and then you have a continual loss rate each year. Natural causes, trees die of natural causes. Our tree canopy as a whole is considered to be in an over-mature state, which means that a majority of our trees are in the twilight of their life. So, we stand to lose a lot more trees over the next few decades.
When you say tree canopy, will you just explain what that means?
Well, tree canopy, when I talk about tree canopy, I'm talking about all of the city-owned trees that are in the city right-of-way, the street right-of-way, city parks, city buildings, and that kind of thing.
Will you explain to everybody, which trees are we responsible for as homeowners or business owners, and where are they located, and how do you tell?
Sure. Sometimes it can be pretty confusing. Other times it can be very easily determined. When there's a sidewalk, almost always, not always, but almost always, the street right-of-way extends from the back side of a sidewalk across the street to the other back side of the sidewalk. If sidewalks aren't there, but the neighborhood driveways are concrete, there's typically a sidewalk panel in that driveway where a sidewalk would be. So you can kind of see, line up a few driveways and see, trees are on one side or the other. If neither one of those things exist, it can be pretty tough to tell. So if there's a question, they can get a hold of us. We can access the plat books that were the original plat books for Sedgwick County, make some measurements, go out to the site, make some measurements off some landmarks, and come up with a very reasonable and fairly accurate way to tell who's who on the trees, who belongs to who.
How do people get a hold of you guys to do that?
They can call Park and Recreation 268-4361. There is a prompt to get forestry information, and then once they make that phone call, a work order is created. Whatever's needed based on that request is then delivered, whether it be an inspection. Based on that inspection, we may do pruning, we may do a removal, we may see that a hazard exists that we have to take care of immediately, and we do that. So that's how they can get a hold of us.
Before we let you go, I want to have you talk for a minute about why it's so important that we keep all of our trees growing and maturing and thriving.
Well, that's a good question, and I get a complaint a lot of times about just having trees. Why do we need them? I read a study from a city that is comparable to the size of Wichita. This city was just a little bit larger than Wichita. They did a valuation of their trees, which they just wanted to get a dollar figure value of the trees that they had, and then they analyzed that. The value of the trees that they had was over $500 million. That's no small chunk of change. The annual environmental impact that those trees give back to the city in benefit was over $4.7 million. Now, I'm not going to say that those exact numbers would apply here in Wichita, but I'm pretty sure that they would be close.
Because they impact our air quality, and if we don't have good air quality, then we get fined. And
absolutely. If you want your gasoline to cost more, if you want to pay, whatever the permit fee is to get your car registered or tagged or whatever the EPA regulations would be, let's get rid of our trees, because they are one of the primary filters in our air. They take in carbon, they take in pollution, they release fresh oxygen, they mitigate stormwater, they do all kinds of things for us, besides the fact that they shade our homes and in the summertime and allow sunlight to come through during the winter and reduce our energy costs. So there's a lot of things that trees do for us that we take for granted on a daily basis.
And I know having nice parks and green spaces with trees are also important to prospective businesses when they're looking at being able to recruit people to come work here.
Absolutely. Quality of life is a huge part of having a treed community. Just ask the folks in Arizona whether or not they like some trees. If you go to a park like Central Riverside Park that's fairly heavily treed, we've unfortunately had to remove a lot lately, but it's still fairly heavily treed. You can see people running everywhere. You go to another park that has almost no trees or no mature trees, and nobody's using it.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that we need open space for soccer, frisbee, flying kites, and that's very appropriate to have. But the trees themselves provide a framework for that and provide shade. And you go out and play soccer for a while, well, you're going to want to come sit under a tree and cool off. So they're very important to our lives.
Is there anything else you want people to know?
We talked about right-of-way a little bit, but what we didn't talk about was the difference between a utility easement and a street right-of-way, and who's in charge of what. A lot of times we get calls for trees in alleys or in utility easements, and the city does not maintain utility easements unless that easement is in the street right-of-way. So if there are power lines running through your backyard, that's not the city's responsibility. If there's an alleyway between you and your neighbor in the back, that's also not the city's responsibility. Those easements are shared between the adjoining neighbors and are the property owner's responsibility to maintain.
Good to know. Learned lots today.
Good.
All right, Gary, well, thank you for being here, and we will leave your contact information up on the screen as we go. Thanks for watching.